Yeah, we can start now.
Chairperson of the Visakhapatnam branch of SARC of ICI, CAG Bharati Dev Garu. Resource person of today's webinar, CAP Jainender from Chennai. My dear students, good evening to you all. The month of October is immediately the focus and the attention will be on the 2nd of October, which is Gandhi Jayanti, and also the Lal Bahadur Shastri Jayanti. Yesterday, we have celebrated Gandhi Jayanti in a manner prescribed by the ICI by distributing educational stationery kits to the unprivileged students. And we have, the Visakhapatnam branch has distributed this stationery kits to the students of Eden Sprouts, one of the institution in MVP Colony, Visakhapatnam. My dear students, hope you are following the newsletter of SICASA Visakhapatnam as well as websites updations of ICI and SARC from time to time, because the examination month of November is fast approaching. There are so many announcements are given by the ICIA, SARC about the coaching classes, revision classes, crash courses, and also the examination rules and regulations under this COVID pandemic conditions. Please follow from time to time the websites as well as our newsletter also to get updates on the latest happenings from time to time. And now today we are fortunate enough to have the speaker from Chennai, an eminent speaker who is dealing in ITR changes of this year. There are a lot of changes in this ITR forms, especially this year. And till the last month, some of the ITRs have not been fully geared up. But now, as of now, all the ITRs from 1 to 7 all are ready. So he is here to address our queries, our questions, our doubts, whatever are there. Whatever are the doubts, you raise the hand. After the session is over, he will address all the questions and queries. Now I request the chairperson of the Visakhapatnam branch, G. Bharati Dev Garu, to address the students.
Good evening, sir. Chairman SICASA and the team SICASA and the speaker Jayendra for accepting our request and to address our students of Visakhapatnam branch. It's we are in the month of October. By this time, everybody used to be busy with their tax audits. So also would have completed it, because tax audit is actual date is September 30th. If extension is there, maximum October. But now we are still in the returns filing stage due to this COVID pandemic. I request all the students to be safe and do their works. So the phase of the IT returns in any office will be from the student stage. Like students first, they will be learning how to file the IT returns, then coming to the tax audits and company audits. So this will be more advantage for all the students, what the changes are actually taking place, because Finance Act always gives amendments, and students will be more familiar with their examination perspective rather than the practical approach for the subject. So students, please gear up with the subject as well along with your examination, because the same amendments will be for your examination too. And all the best, students. I think the speaker will enrich the students to have a happy filing season. Thank you so
Pawan, Prashant is there? Pawan?
Sir, yes, sir. I am.
Yeah, Prashant.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, please introduce the speaker of today's session.
Yes, sir. CA Jainender P is an associate member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. He completed his undergraduation BCom from Loyola College in the year 2012. He completed C in July 2016 and have been in practice since January 2018. His core area of specialization is direct taxes, handling audit and assurance, consultancy, and back office support for the domestic and international clients. He had presented papers on tax audit, reporting and Income Tax Amendment Act 2019 in Nellore branch of SIRC, paper on income tax return forms in Association of Chartered Accountants, Chennai. Hello. Now I request today's resource person to start the session.
Can I take it over?
Yes, sir, you may take
Please, sir.
Yes,
Please.
sir, you can start.
Okay, okay. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Prashant, for the warm welcome. Hope all of you are staying safe, are healthy, and enjoying this pandemic. I cannot say it as enjoying, but still, many of us have got time to spend with our families, and we have got time for ourselves to relook into what we are and what we are capable of. So I hope you would have all had a very fruitful pandemic holidays, in fact. So first of all, I would like to thank Sri C.A. Murli Krishna sir, the chairman SICASA, for giving me an opportunity to address a very young and energetic future chartered accountants of our country. I would also thank the branch chairman uh, for hosting this meeting today. I would also like to place on record my sincere gratitude towards CA Shri PVSP Kumar sir, with whom, I mean, last couple of days I have had a very limited talk with him. So I would like to place a special sincere thanks to CA PVSP Kumar sir for recommending me to be the speaker for the day and to address the gathering. Uh, income tax return forms. These forms are very basic thing for every chartered accountancy student. Any chartered accountancy student who is pursuing the course has to, or very initial stage of his CA career itself, they first start with the income tax return forms only. So it is very important for them to understand how important the income tax return filing is. Even the smallest of the error would cause a very big trouble. So I'm here to address on the key changes in the income tax return forms for assessment year 2021, and any questions or any clarifications which is required, please do put it up in the question answer box or the chat box. As madam has suggested, we can take it up at the end as well, or in the question answer session separately. So the agenda of this seminar today would be first the introduction about the forms, the various sections and the rules which are important to understand from where the income tax return forms are emerging. Then there is the ITR forms 1 to 7. Then there is a due date of each and every ITR, importance of correct filing of the ITR. I'm stressing on the point here, it is the correct filing of ITR, the consequences of which we will understand once we go through these slides. Then the applicability and changes in the ITR forms for the assessment year 2021. Then like common errors while filing the ITR returns. Though it is not directly related to the topic, but still I felt it is important that since you all being students, it is important for you to understand what are the basic common errors which can happen while filing the ITR returns forms. So the introduction part, the income tax returns, the procedure for assessment is covered under section 139 and 140. 139, as we all know, it is the due date for filing of the return, the belated return, the revised return, defective return. Every other concepts are covered in this section 139. Then there is Rule 12. Rule 12 is a rule where the income tax return forms are notified by CBDT. Then there is penalties and penalties imposable, and what are the offenses and prosecution for non-filing or delay in filing or error committed during the time of filing of the income tax returns. I just wanted to confirm, is the screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Visible. Yeah.
Thank you. So first is the section 139. It talks about company, firm, or any other person as defined under the Income Tax Act who is having income more than the taxable exemption limit of 2.5 lakh has to mandatorily furnish the return under section 139. The prescribed forms have been notified under Rule 12. There is a section 139C which CBDT, which is the board, has been empowered who can issue rules to certain class or classes of person to dispense off with furnishing of the return of income or any statement or any audit report. So first we talked about person having more than basic exemption limit income has to file the return mandatorily. Here there is a section which specifically talks about any specific person or class of person who are not required to furnish the information unless and otherwise it is been called for specifically. So section 139D mandates filing of the return in electronic form. So who has to file electronically also has been mentioned. As of now, those people with income less than 5 lakh rupees and who are filing ITR 1 can file their return manually provided they do not have any refund. So basically their income is more than 2.5 lakh rupees, maximum of 5 lakh, and they do not have refund. Those are the individuals who are filing ITR 1 can file the return manually with the income tax department. All other classes of person are mandated to file the return electronically. So Rule 12 was is the rule where the ITR forms ITR 1 to 7 are notified. ITR 1 and 4 was notified by notification number 1, wherein it consisted of 8 pages. and other ITR forms except for 1 and 4 were issued by notification number 31. Appendix 2 to this Rule 12 consists of the draft format of all the ITR forms, which was notified on 29th of May 2020. The relevance of the date 29th of May 2020 is very important because there is a case law which I'll be dealing with, which will be very important to ensure that ITR return forms are notified well within time. These forms were notified on 29th of May, whereas Gazette notification was issued on 3rd of June. Apart from the changes which have taken place in the ITR forms, there is a new addition, which is the ITR acknowledgement. Till the previous year, there was only one concept of ITR V, which was the final acknowledgement. Now, CBDT has come up with an additional form, ITR acknowledgement, as a separate form. So Rule 12 also, there is a section 139D wherein it says all the reports like tax audit report or the transfer pricing report or any claim which is being made, which it has to be certified by the chartered accountant, all such reports or forms are to be done only electronically. So presently, all the ITR return forms are available in Excel utility. Java version, except for ITR 6, all other forms are available. Now, this was the relevance of judgment of Delhi High Court, Avinash Gupta versus Union of India, which I was referring to. If you go through this entire case law, this particular paragraph has the relevance of it. Avinash Gupta versus Union of India. Avinash Gupta had registered a case stating that there were continuous delay by the government in notifying the forms, because of which the assessee and the chartered accountants are facing lot of issues in completing the income tax return filing plus the audit returns within the time limits prescribed by the government. So having gone through the facts of the case and the present situation, even this current year, we are in the same situation wherein the forms are not notified by the government before the commencement of the assessment year. It states clearly the ITR forms and the reports, that is the form 3CD, 3CA, 3CEB, all the report filings forms are to be made available before 1st of April. So that ample time is available to the professionals and also to the assessee to ensure timely completion without any delay. Because each and every time it is the chartered accountant or the associations who go in for a request to the government to extend the time for filing of the returns. So now we go ahead with the IT return forms. Basically, ITR 1 is for the individuals. ITR 2 and 3 is for individuals and HUF. 4 is for those having presumptive income. 5 is for other than individual, HUF and companies, that is the AOP, partnership firm, LLP firms, etc. ITR 6 is for companies. ITR 7 is for charitable exempt entities, that is the trust or Section 8 companies. So the due date of filing of income tax returns, the due dates have been revised in comparison to the previous year. These due dates have been revised both in view of COVID as well as normal situation. So I've bifurcated the due dates into two parts. That is, one liable for audit and those not liable for the audit. So liable for audit are those cases where 44AB is applicable. The income tax return, previously the due date was 31st of October, but now the due date is 30th of November. Audit report due date was 30th of September. Now it is 31st of October 2020 because of this COVID. Those not liable for audit, that is all the examples of salaried employees and those having less than 1 crore turnover, or those going in for the presumptive income filing. These people have, their actual existing due date was 31st of July, but now these due dates have been extended up to 30th of November. Whereas the transfer pricing related assessees, the due date remains the same. Previously also it was 30th November and currently also it remains the same as 30th November 2020. Now let's move to the importance of filing a correct income tax return. Why is it income tax return filing is so important that it has to be filed correctly? Though the onus is on the assessee who is filing the income tax return, it is always we as a chartered accountant who assist them in filing the income tax returns. For non-filing of the income tax return correctly, there are various drawbacks in it. One such as the assessee will receive notice under section 139 subsection 9, which is the defective return. Defective return has a time limit of 15 days within which it has to be responded. If it is not responded, CPC might give an additional opportunity to submit to file a response or to file a corrected return. If the time limits are not complied with, the return will get invalidated. Return being invalidated means that no return has been filed under section 139. So the time limit also gets barred and we cannot file return under section 139 again. So automatically the penalty and litigation proceedings will follow. Then there is intimation under section 143(1). Every assessee who files the income tax return will get this intimation under section 143(1). This is basically an intimation wherein what return has been filed by the assessee as per the income tax return and what has been computed by the CPC. Any variation between the two will be reflected here. So wherever possible, if any differences are there, we can go in for rectification under section 154. If a correct return is being filed, there is no requirement to go in for rectification under section 154. Thereby, lot of time and efforts are being saved. Many a times, for the rectification, not many chartered accountants bill the client separately for it. Because what we collect as a fee is only for the income tax return filing. If any 154 additional work is to be done, hardly we charge the client for it. So it is an additional time and effort involved for us to comply with the correct provision of the return and file a corrected return. So then there is a concept of intimation under 143 subsection 1 subclause A, wherein before processing of the return under section 143(1), if there is any variance identified at the time of processing of the return, any adjustment which is being proposed by the CPC towards the income, there is an opportunity given to the assessee to comply within 30 days. There is 3 options available, whether we agree for it, whether we partially agree, or we disagree with the proposed adjustment of CPC. So if we disagree, we'll have to give a valid reason. There might be various, there might be a technical glitch in the software of CPC who is processing the return, because of which at the time of processing, there might be a variation, which definitely doesn't require any correction in the return. But as a standard procedure, we'll have to respond to it within 30 days. If there is a mistake which we identify, that can be corrected by filing a revised return. So once we file a revised return, once again CPC will take that up for processing, and normal return under section 143(1) would be processed. Then there is chances of picking up for scrutiny, assuming a simple example wherein there is an individual who is having a business income as well. So ITR 3 we are filing. ITR 3 mandates business balance sheet alone to be given in the ITR 3. There is no requirement to give the individual assets or individual bank balances or cash balances available. Basically, individual trial balance is not required to be given. Only those which are related to the business, the balance sheet and P&L are to be disclosed. By mistake, when a trial balance of an individual is received and business balance sheet and P&L is also received, if at the time of filling of the income tax return form, previously it would have done correctly, we would have taken the balance sheet and P&L of the business concern. But current year, assuming the person who is filling the form has mistakenly put the entire trial balance of his personal account, which is having huge variation in the capital account balance between the business concern and the individual trial balance, then there are high chances of CPC department picking up the case, picking up this particular assessee for scrutiny. This is not something which definitely mandates a scrutiny, but still, because of the error in the filing, there are possibilities of scrutiny being picked up, which again, though as a chartered accountant, it is an additional remuneration for us, but still, return filing is a return filing, which we need to comply with it correctly. So section 148 is nothing but income escaped assessment. Assuming if a correct return is not filed, correct income is not disclosed in the income tax return, and notice under 148, wherein 6 years time limit is there to reopen the assessment, and once again income will be recomputed, and there is huge penalty for it, which if a correct return is being filed, this can be avoided. Then there are penal proceedings for it. There is penalty under section 270 capital A, wherein for every underreporting or misreporting of income, it may lead to penalty of minimum 50% and maximum of 200% of the tax element on the underreported income. So 200% is a very huge penalty proceeding here in this provision. There is also prosecution under section 277 and 278. 277 talks about furnishing a false statement and 278 a false return. So giving a false information here there is a penalty of 25 lakh rupees and imprisonment of minimum 6 months and maximum 7 years, or both. And in any other case other than these, imprisonment for a term of 3 months to 2 years, and fine is also applicable. Section 279 capital A, these states that these offences are non-cognizable. So having talked about the various penal proceedings and the importance of filing, let's move on to the applicability of each and every ITR and what are the key changes specifically which have come in for the assessment year 2020-21. So this is a summary chart of all the ITRs put together and various heads of income, carry forward losses, exempt incomes, each and every ITR, its applicability, who can take it up and who cannot. This in detail we'll take it up further, but this is basically a summary chart, which maybe I'll share the PPT with the organizers so that they can circulate it to all the participants.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
So ITR 1. So who can file the ITR 1? There are various criteria here available which states persons who can file the ITR 1 form. ITR 1 form is applicable only to ordinary resident individuals. Couple of years back, even non-residents used to file ITR 1, but since previous year, non-residents have been moved to file ITR 2. So ITR 1 form has been made specifically towards residents who are ordinary residents only, having total income less than 50 lakh rupees. Total income shall consist of salary or pension, income from one house property, and other sources income, excluding dividend income, which is taxable under section 115 BBDA, which is nothing but dividend income received from domestic companies in excess of rupees 10 lakh, which is chargeable at rate of 10%. If I have more than 10 lakh income under dividend, I cannot go in for this ITR 1 form. Then there is income referred to in section 115 BBE. There is winning from lottery and race horses. These are chargeable at special rate at 30%. Hence, these are out of the purview of ITR 1 form. So we have seen who can file the ITR 1 form. Now let's see who cannot file the ITR 1 form. Individuals having more than 50 lakh income. If an individual is a director in any company, please note, if an individual is a director in any company, automatically such individual, though he is having less than 50 lakh income or though he is having only salary income, I mean the director remuneration from the company, still such person are not eligible to file ITR 1 form. Any person who is having any unlisted share, holding unlisted shares, are not eligible. Income from more than one house property, or having brought forward loss to be claimed under house property income, income from lottery and house race sources, again the dividend income, capital gain income, or their agriculture income exceeds 5,000 rupees, income from business or profession, if any loss is there under the head income from other sources. Loss from other sources, uh, it can be set off against any other income, but it cannot be carried forward. Loss from other sources is possible if, assuming there is an interest income and there is an interest outflow also. Though you are not into a finance business, but still you have interest income, you are gaining interest as well and you are paying off interest as well. And since following receipt base of accounting for the individual, their possibility is there that there can be a loss during the year. Hence, if at all there is any loss, such person cannot file ITR 1. If a person is claiming relief under section 90 and 91, relief under 90 and 91 is nothing but having income abroad and who are claiming relief for foreign tax credit in India. My 115 BBE is nothing but taxes on income referred to in section 68, 69, which talks about income, unexplained income, unexplained cash credits, unexplained source of income, basically. Then if an individual has any asset located outside India, even such person cannot file ITR 1. And if any person is resident outside India, basically a non-resident, they also cannot file ITR 1. So key changes in the ITR 1 form. In the first page itself, there is a checkpoint being included from the current assessment year 2021, wherein the question is, are you filing return under 7th proviso to section 139(1). What is 7th proviso to section 139? 1 is basically the 3 criteria which is mentioned below. 7th proviso is nothing but those people who are not supposed to file return of income. If it basically means your income is less than the taxable limit, basic exemption limit of 2.5 lakh rupees. So this particular point is applicable only for those individuals who are having less than 2.5 lakh of income and who are not required to file the return of income. And if those people are falling under these 3 criteria, which is if such person has deposited amount exceeding 1 crore rupees in current account, basically deposit into the current account of more than 1 crore rupees, or it is or condition here, has incurred expenditure of more than 2 lakh rupees for travel to a foreign country for yourself or for any other person. So it is important to note here that it is for yourself or any other person. It can, assuming I have spent for myself or for my family for more than 2 lakh rupees, then this provision gets triggered here. Has incurred expenditure of more than 1 lakh rupees on consumption of electricity, basically has paid electricity bill of more than 1 lakh rupees. So the question can come up is how to identify such person, because as a chartered accountant or as a tax consultant we come across only those people who file their return of income and who come to us to get their return filed. But this section goes one step ahead. It states that people who are not required to file the return and have incurred so and so expenses and have exceeded the specific limits here. So this provision is very difficult and it requires education to the assessees who are filing the return so that they can very well check among their source, I mean among their family members who are not filing their return of income and are exceeding the limits, then it is mandatory for them also to file the return under section 139 subsection 1. For any other person who is regularly filing the return of income under section 139(1), for them we can directly go and tick this box as no, and we don't have to collect any information under this clause and we can go ahead with it. So basically only for those who are not filing the return of income. Then there is a addition basically under the nature of employment. In the ITR form where we select the nature of employment, previously it was stated as government. Now they have bifurcated central government or state government specifically. There are new deductions which are eligible under chapter 6A which have been included. 80 EEA which has been included, which is nothing but interest deduction on housing loan for affordable housing. This is over and above the principal repayment what is covered under section 80C. This particular section 80 EEA is interest deduction and not principal deduction. It is interest deduction of additional amount up to 1.5 lakh rupees or what is paid, whichever is lower. This affordable housing is nothing but there are various conditions to it wherein the total value of the new house should not exceed 45 lakh rupees and you shouldn't have any other, that should be your first house basically, and there shouldn't be any other self-occupied property, and the flooring, the square feet area, all that various conditions are there which can be read specifically. Then there is section 80 EEB which has been included, which is nothing but interest deduction, same up to 1.5 lakh rupees on purchase of electric vehicles. Government has by introducing this deduction section, government is giving clear indication that they want to move towards e-vehicle concept in the future so that the present diesel and petrol driven vehicles can be done away with it. So slowly and steadily they are moving towards e-vehicle concept. So to boost the sale of e-vehicles, interest payment is eligible for deduction. There is a condition to it. It has to be purchased through loan and the loan should have been sanctioned between 1st of April 19 up to 31st of March 2023. Then there is a new schedule DI which has been included. DI is nothing but details of investments. Till previous year we used to have only one column wherein chapter 60 various deductions we used to enter and how much is eligible, that used to be automatically calculated. Now because of this COVID pandemic, government has extended the time limits for investing under section 80C or 80D or various other sections eligible under chapter 6A. if investments are made until 31st of July 2020. Earlier it was 30th June. It was further extended up to 31st of July 2020. Any additional investment is made during the period April 2020 to 31st July 2020, that particular investment can also be claimed towards the financial year 1920. So to have a clear bifurcation, this particular schedule has been introduced, wherein we'll have to give the bifurcation of total deductions being claimed, and out of the total, how much has been invested during the period April to July 2020. So that this information will help the government when the financial year 2021 return gets notified, so that there is no double time claim of deduction benefit. So those were the important changes in the ITR 1. ITR 2 is nothing but it is applicable for individuals and HUF. Now these are having more than 50 lakh rupees. All such criteria are applicable except for those people who are having income from business, that is PGBP income. So this is applicable for individuals not eligible to use ITR 1. Again, those eligible for carry forward losses, the non-residents, all those individuals can file ITR 2. So all those changes which were there in ITR 1 continues to be applicable for ITR 2 as well. Further, 80D section, this particular slide was there in the previous year return form, wherein 80D there was a drop down available, wherein we used to just select it has been the mediclaim is being claimed towards whether it is for self and family including senior citizen, all those things. But now they have brought up a specific schedule itself for 80D to disclose each and every line item specifically, separately. So they have given a clear bifurcation for self and family who are a senior citizen, who are whose parents are not a senior citizen, self is a senior citizen, all such clear bifurcation, so that as and when how we enter the amount, depending on the maximum eligibility, your deduction will be calculated accordingly. So apart from that, there were no other changes in the ITR 2 form. Then the comes to the ITR 3. ITR 3, who is eligible to file ITR 3 form? Again, individuals and HUF having income from PGBP or profession. Basically, it's income from PGBP excluding the presumptive income. So people who are having presumptive income will file ITR 4. Other than those who are having PGBP income will file ITR 3. This is a supplement. Those who can file ITR 2, again the same condition, non-resident or more than 50 lakh income, having PGBP income, will file ITR 3. More specifically, partner in a partnership firm has to compulsorily file ITR 3 only. Though they do not have any business income as such, but partner remuneration is considered as a business income, and hence partner in a partnership firm is mandated to file ITR 3 form. Specific changes in ITR 3, again, the same thing continues what is covered in ITR 1 and 2. The checkpoint what was created, the deductions eligible, the new deductions under interest on housing loan and interest on vehicle loan, e-vehicle loan. Then there is a under the general information column in the ITR 3, there is a new line item included wherein it asks specifically whether you are a director in a company at any time during the previous year. If the answer is yes, then we'll have to give this bifurcation. This was applicable previous year also. Previous year was the first year which came into effect, which is financial year 18-19. But in 1920, in the updated notified forms, the type of company has to be given specifically, whether it is a domestic company or a foreign company. Till previous year, this bifurcation was not there, but current year, this bifurcation has been newly incorporated. There are various other changes as well in the ITR 3 forms, which has a common relevance with other ITR forms like ITR 5, ITR 6 as well. So I'll deal with it in the future slides. So now I come to the ITR 4 form. ITR 4 is nothing but the presumptive income. People who are going under the 44 ADA, 44 AD, all those assessees can file ITR 4 form, which is a very simple form. But as I said, partnership firms, partnership firm can also go in for presumptive taxation. Individuals or HUF can also go in for presumptive taxation. Who cannot use ITR 4? All the conditions as applicable to ITR 1. Non-filing of ITR, same applies for ITR 4 as well. Additional conditions are if an individual having more than one house property. ITR 1 spoke about only one house property. ITR 4 also restricts for more only one house property. There was an amendment wherein it was allowed that an individual can have two self-occupied properties, but this amendment has not been given effect in the ITR forms as on date. So it mandates that if you have more than one house property, you will have to automatically go in for ITR 2 only, even if you are having presumptive income taxation. Or if you have business income, then you can go in for the ITR 3, wherein even under ITR 3, you can still file same concept of presumptive, wherein the gross total income and the 8% or 50% as applicable can be disclosed. There is an option under the balance sheet and the P&L. Just below, you will have no accounts case. There you can record stating that you are filing presumptive income only, but because of having more than one house property, you are going in for ITR 3. So again, coming to ITR 4, if an individual having business income, having presumptive taxation, and having capital gain income, assuming he has a very small amount, let's say just one transaction he has done during the year and has any short-term capital gain during that particular year. Once capital gain income is triggered, such person cannot file ITR 4 form. So they will have to mandatorily file ITR 3, and very well they can go under the no accounts case, and they don't have to fill the entire balance sheet and P&L, which is a cumbersome process again. So ITR 4, ITR 5 is basically other than individual, HUF, company, and trust or companies which are claiming exemptions. So who are the other than these are basically the partnership firm, LLP, AOP, BOI, etc. And other changes, again, as I said, I'll consolidate all the changes together and I've dealt with separately. So ITR 6 is basically for companies other than claiming exemption under section 11, section 13A, 139(4)(c), or those who are claiming deduction under section 35, which is nothing but the research and development expenditures. So what are the specific changes which have come in ITR 6? Turnover of domestic companies. Till the previous year, we used to look into the turnover of financial year 16-17, wherein the limit prescribed was 250 crores. Now the turnover has been increased to 400 crores, and the year which has to be seen as 2017-18. This is specifically seen so that your tax rate, the corporate tax rate, benefit of reduced tax rate can be availed. Initially, the tax rate was 30%, and if your turnover exceeds 400 crores, you are mandated to have a corporate tax rate of 30% only. But in case your turnover is less than 400 crores for financial year 17-18, you have the option to have that benefit of reduced tax rate of 25% plus cess of 1%. Now, whether there is a new concept also which has come in, which is 115BA, 115BAA, and 115BAB. These are for manufacturing companies and also for domestic companies other than manufacturing companies, wherein reduced rate of corporate taxes are applicable with effect from assessment year 2021. So what is basically these sections? These sections are 115BA is for manufacturing company. This was given reduced rate of 25% specifically for manufacturing companies only. This is applicable for turnover less than 400 crores. Manufacturing company less than 400 crores, they can opt in for 25% rate. What is 115BAA? This is for any domestic company. It is not restricted to the manufacturing company. It is for any company having less than 400 crore turnover. No, this 115BAA is a new section which was brought in with effect from 1st October 2019, wherein any domestic company can avail reduced rate of 22% plus surcharge of 10% and cess, provided there are various conditions wherein it states that you cannot claim any deductions under chapter 6A or any specific exemptions or any additional depreciation like section 32 AD, which is the backward area location, those depreciation, and more specifically MAT provisions are not applicable for these type of companies. So once there is one other condition which it states that you cannot carry forward any losses, any business losses cannot be carried forward. So this is an one-time option given. You can opt in for this particular section to avail lower tax rate benefit. If at all at any given point of time company opts out of this section and goes in for normal taxation of 25%, then they cannot, in any future date, they cannot come back to this particular section. So this is only a one-time option given. This majorly benefits those companies who are into service oriented, like they do not have any losses, or they have only profits year on year. So that MAT provision is not applicable. There is no carry forward of losses required, and there is a benefit of reduced tax rate which they can avail it. There is only one condition to it: before filing of the income tax return, they'll have to file a form. I think the form number is 10F or something, which has to be filed with the DSC in the income tax login portal of the SSC, wherein we need to disclose that we are opting in for this particular section of reduced tax rate. Again, with effect from 1st October 2019, there is a new section which is brought in, 115 BAB, which is specifically for manufacturing companies. It is a new manufacturing company which is being starting. Those who are existing manufacturing companies will fall under 115 BA. Those which are new companies starting their business with effect from on or after 1st October 2019, and who start their business before 31st of March 2023 can enjoy the lower tax benefit of 15%. This 15% tax benefit, 15% rate, what is applicable is the lowest in comparison to any status assessees like LLP or partnership firms or AOPs or any status of assessee. This particular benefit is given to manufacturing companies. This is basically to boost new investments to come into India, so that new companies, new investments can be made into manufacturing sector, and more and more employment can be generated uh, by the companies, which can benefit the economy of India. So here also there is an additional 10% surcharge mandatory applicable and 4% cess, which will have an effective tax rate of 17.16%. This is much beneficial when we compare with actual tax rate of 25% or 30% tax rate companies. So then there is in under schedule business BP, uh, there is a new bifurcation. Assuming if you're in the business of life insurance, not many of us would be having life insurance business clients, but still, for the benefit of all, if at all assessees into the business of life insurance and having any other business as well, then clear bifurcation has to be given between the life insurance business and any other business, so that what is the net profit and deductions or any disallowances specifically towards life insurance business has to be given specifically here. Then there is in the schedule OS, there is a removal of point number C. Point number C was nothing but the accumulated balance of recognized provident fund. Provident fund is basically for individuals. So rightly so, they have removed it from ITR 6, which was irrelevant till previous year in the income tax return form. So coming to the changes in the Ind AS form, in the balance sheet and Ind AS of the balance sheet and P&L of Ind AS, they have rightfully removed the no accounts case clause. No accounts case clause is applicable for those who are going in for the presumptive taxation. Obviously, if a company is Ind AS provisions are applicable to a company, it is obvious that their turnover is very high and they cannot go in for the presumptive taxation. Hence, rightfully, logically, they have removed the no accounts case clause from the balance sheet and P&L in the Ind AS schedule. So coming to the yeah. So coming to the provisions of tax audit, though it is not directly relevant to the income tax return forms as such, but this particular clause is very important to understand because with effect from assessment year 2021, that is financial year 1920, the provisions of tax audit has been amended, wherein the turnover limit has been increased from 1 crore to 5 crore. I repeat, 1 crore to 5 crore, provided there are conditions for it, wherein it states that the total receipts in cash should not exceed more than 5% of the total receipts of the business. Similarly, total on the payment side as well, the total payments should not exceed 5% in cash. So this is the change which has come in the section 44 AB. So I just thought I'll take up an example on this so that it can be easily understood here. Please remember, it is total receipts has to be considered. It does not talk about turnover. It is total receipts, whether it is a loan received or it is a business receipt towards debtors or it is any other receipt. Total receipt has to be considered here. And 5% limit should not exceed in cash. Total payment and total receipt in cash should not exceed 5%. So example is there is a turnover of 4 crore, which is between 1 to 5 crore. A sale out of which out of the total sale of 4 crores, 10 lakhs is in cash. That is cash has been received 10 lakhs. Partner has brought in 15 lakhs in cash as a additional capital. There is other loan from outsider of 10 lakh rupees, that is through banking channel. So whether tax audit is applicable under section 44 AB, since we are in virtual mode, I cannot directly ask the participants here. So let me go ahead with answering it directly. Since the turnover is less than 5 crore, we can take the benefit of the 44 AB non-applicability. So we'll have to see the additional conditions, whether 5% in cash receipts and payments have exceeded or no. So whether tax audit is applicable? Yes, it is applicable though your turnover is less than 5 crore. Reason, the total receipts considered is total sale of 4 crore plus partner bringing in capital of 15 lakhs plus third party loan of 10 lakh. So total of 425 lakhs is the total receipt to be considered. Out of which, how much is cash element involved? Total cash receipt. 10 lakhs is out of the sale. 15 lakhs is in partner bringing in capital. So total 25 lakh is the total cash involvement here. So what is the percentage directly to cash and the total receipts? It works out to around 5.89%, which is well beyond the limit of 5%, and hence tax audit provisions are applicable, and 44 AB tax audit report has to be filed mandatorily. So this is a very important change. This, if any company or any business who are dealing in zero cash, they can avail this benefit if their turnover is within 5 crore limit. They don't have to file tax audit report. They don't have to get their accounts audited under section 44AB. So additional changes under part AOI, disallowance of interest paid to towards the borrowing from NBFCs. Any interest, if it is being paid, has been disallowed under section 43B. So that specifically under point 11 subclause D has to be disclosed. Then there is a new point included, point number 17, wherein any if a person is exercising option under section 92 CE, 92 CE, which is nothing but transfer pricing secondary adjustment. This I have a separate schedule, transfer pricing secondary adjustment. I'll explain it at that point of time what exactly this talks about. So there is a change in the depreciation schedule, wherein new rate of depreciation of 45% has been included. So what is this depreciation of 45%? This depreciation rate is applicable on plant and machineries. It talks about any plant and machinery, any car purchased between 23rd of August 2019. I repeat, 23rd of August 2019 till 31st of March 2021. If any car has been purchased, instead of normal 15% rate, 30% rate would be applicable. Similarly, for any other asset wherein 30% rate is eligible, additionally 15%, that is 45% rate would be eligible to be claimed. So to give this effect in the income tax return form, specifically this particular new rate has been included. This was basically to boost the automobile sale in the country, because there was a huge downfall in the automobile industry. So give this benefit, additional expense can be claimed, and to that extent profits will be lower and taxes also will be paid lesser. So there is a pass-through income. So what is pass-through income? Pass-through income is nothing but an income, as the name suggests, pass-through. The income of one entity is passed on to other person who is liable to pay taxes on it. Though the income is of one entity, income will be passed on to the other person, and that other person is liable to pay taxes on it. So example of such pass-through income status would be the business-oriented funds, investment funds entities, wherein income from such investment or business trust, though it is the income of the business trust, the income is distributed among the members of the business trust, and income is taxable in the hands of the members of the business trust. So business trust will, as though it is an entity, will not be liable to pay any taxes. It will be the members of the business trust who will be liable to pay taxes on it. So to identify such gains arising out of capital gains, specifically from income from the business trust and all, a new line item has been included stating what and all are as per your normal capital gain, disclose it separately. What is received from pass-through as a pass-through income, that you need to disclose it separately. So that bifurcation has been brought out with effect from assessment year 2021. So this is the schedule pass-through income. You could see clearly the bifurcation, capital gain, whether short-term, long-term, any dividend being received from such pass-through income entities. Losses which have been till previous year, the loss also we were not disclosing it separately, but current year onwards, such losses also are to be included separately and disclosed separately. So to give effect to this losses, in the schedule carry forward losses also, they have brought in the pass-through income losses separately, whether it is from house property pass-through income loss or capital gain pass-through income loss. And as we discussed earlier, the life insurance business. So if at all any loss is there from life insurance business specifically, then such losses are also to be disclosed separately here. Then there are changes like PAN or Aadhaar. Till previous year, it was everywhere PAN is the only mandatory thing. But now it states that PAN or Aadhaar, anything can be used interchangeably wherever it is required. Then there is a schedule FSI and TR. FSI is nothing but foreign source income schedule, and TR is tax relief. So if at all any person who is having income from outside India and who is claiming tax relief in India, they'll have to mandatorily file schedule FSI and tax relief. So this is the transfer pricing secondary adjustment which I was talking about. This section is made applicable from 1st of September 2019. So basically financial year 1920 is the first year this section has been brought into. This provision is basically under the transfer pricing provisions. Hence, only if for any entity transfer pricing provisions are applicable, this particular schedule will be applicable for them, else it is not applicable. So what is this schedule of transfer pricing? TPSA is nothing but third party secondary adjustment. Third party secondary adjustment is nothing but with effect from Finance Act 2017, there was a concept of primary adjustment up to 1 crore rupees. So if at the time of assessment between the assessee and the associate enterprise, basically transfer pricing is between associate enterprise and the assessee. So if at all between the assessee and the associated enterprise, if at the time of assessment, if the assessing officer comes out with a variation in the arm's length price and the variation in the total income exceeds more than 1 crore rupees. I repeat, if the variation is more than 1 crore rupees, then such income, such taxes on those income are to be paid under this section 92 CE, and it has to be disclosed specifically here. So rightfully so, the tax rate is 18% and there is a mandatory surcharge of 12% being made applicable here, and normal cess of 4% is applicable. And specifically the how this tax has been paid, like the BSR code, the challan details are to be specifically mentioned. So this challan has to be paid separately. It cannot be combined with your normal self-assessment tax or advance tax. Those challans which we separately paid, this has to be done separately, and it has to be disclosed here that this is the challan which we are paying towards this particular tax which is being applicable. So Schedule DI, it is the same as was applicable in this ITR 1, but additionally, it is the section 54 to section 54 GB and various other sections wherein the time limits have been exceeded, like for making investment or construction of house property, investment of new house for towards your capital gain income, uh, in investment in REC bonds and other things, wherein it had a specific time limit of within 139 due date. Now they have extended. Earlier it was up to 30th September, but now on 29th of September, Act has been passed stating they are extending the due date up to 31st March. This also is in view of this COVID pandemic. Hence, any investment up to 31st March is eligible. So it will be considered as invested within the timelines of section 139(1). So coming into the provisions of ITR 7, wherein basically trust is the first thing which comes into our mind. There are also other trusts, like other companies like Section 8 companies, which is not-for-profit organization, the political parties, those who are claiming exemption under under Section 10, which is the educational institutions. These are the assessees who are covered under this ITR 7. ITR 7 basically didn't have any major change as such. There was supposed to be one change which was supposed to be brought in with effect from 1st of June, wherein every trust registered, existing registered trust has to go in for new registration. That is existing trust, they'll have to just file an application and automatically they'll get a new number for registration. And those who are going in for new registration have to file all the documents, required documents, and after proper scrutiny of the documents, trust registration will be granted. This particular section, which was supposed to be made applicable from 1st of June, was deferred till 1st of October, and now it has been further deferred to 1st of April 2021. So as far as assessment year 2021 is concerned, we don't have to disclose anything as such in the ITR return form. So what we used to file till previously, the same thing can be continued as it is. So this I was talking about whether application for registration is made as per the new provisions and all. Since it is deferred, I think we can skip this, and there is no new change brought in for this particular ITR return form. So since coming to the ITR V form, as I mentioned earlier, ITR V form was the only form which was the final acknowledgement once we submit the income tax return. But with effect from assessment year 2021, once you submit the return, ITR V form will be generated. But ITR V form is not the final form, final acknowledgement, unless and until the ITR V has been electronically verified, or if it has been manually sent to CPC, signed document has been sent to CPC for the individuals. So if at all this e-verification or the manual submission is not done within 120 days, the ITR form which is being submitted will automatically, the return form will automatically become invalid. So invalid return means return has not been, it will be considered as return has not been filed itself. So coming to this is the ITR V form. Earlier it considered of all the incomes and all specifically mentioned. It was a simple one-page form. Now ITR V form consists of the name, PAN, date of filing, year, acknowledgement number of filing, person who has submitted the form, all that detail, person who has verified the form submitted, all that detail will be made available. But below you can find the instructions which clearly states that it has to be e-verified or it has to be submitted manually. Signed copy has to be sent to Bangalore CPC. Only after the procedure is completed, ITR V acknowledgement form will be generated, which looks like this form. So immediately the question comes up is, why was there a requirement to have this type of concept? we can see that many times there were many a times there were cases that once a return is submitted, maybe the assessee would have forgotten to e-verify it, or ITRV signed form has been sent to CPC Bangalore, but because of some issue or the other, CPC Bangalore has not received it, and 120 days time limit has expired, and there was a concept of condonation, which we can file a condonation, and we used to get an additional time limit to by providing a valid reason. Now CPC has done away with all such thing. In order to give, in order that an assessee could give any reason for it, that the form has been sent to CPC, it has not been received, all such reasons cannot be given anymore. It is mandatory that it has to be submitted, it has to be e-verified to get the final acknowledgement form. So basically, simple excuses which were earlier possible, now it is not possible. Hence, condonation concept also has been done away with it, unless and until some specific reasons have come up with, and CPC might allow it, but unless and until they have done away with the concept of condonation as well. So coming to the common errors which as an student or as an assessee himself who is filling the ITR form, common errors which are possible. I have just pulled out few of the errors which just came to my mind, and I have just recorded it here. Filing incorrect ITR form. That is, ITR 2 is applicable, but I file it ITR 1. Because as I said earlier, filing an incorrect return or giving wrong information also leads to penal proceedings under the Income Tax Act. So it is very much important to first understand what is the, which particular form is applicable to the assessee. So it is very much important here to understand whether individual is a director, individual is not a director, whether individual is having more than 50 lakh income, less than 50 lakh income, whether he is a resident, non-resident, whether his residential status, again, as ITR 1 was only for ordinary resident. So if at all he is a not ordinary resident or a non-resident, automatically he has to file ITR 2. So it is important to get the basic check and balances done before starting the work itself, so that once any client comes, we are very sure that okay, these are the incomes which has been applicable, which he is earning, and this is the form which has to be submitted. Then comes the incorrect personal details of the assessee. There is a possibility that the article assistant might directly go into the portal and just pre-fill the, download the pre-filled version of the ITR form and use that pre-filled version itself in the current year without making the basic changes like the personal details or the bank account details or the address detail, all such things. There is a very much high possibility that bank account details might be changed, or the address of the assessee would have changed. Though in the form 26AS or in the PAN card, the address would be of the old address, still the person might be living in some other location. So it is important to get to understand from the assessee what is the exact address in which he is presently located. And because the importance of the address here is any communication, any like the mobile number or the email ID also. Any email communication or any postal communication would be sent based on the IT return form which has been filled and filed. So it is important that such information is correctly filled and filed. Residential status, as I already said, it is very much important. Then comes deduction, claiming of deduction under Chapter 6A. Under ATC, the housing loan, it is the principal portion which is to be claimed in the ATC and not the interest portion. Also, it is the cumulative conditions under ATC and totals up to maximum limit of 1.5. It is not principal portion can be claimed additionally. Then there are the tuition fees. Again, entire school fee is not eligible to be claimed. It is restricted to the tuition fee alone. So there are various other such conditions which we need to look into. Then there is a possibility of interest under 86, 80 TTA, interest of maximum of 10,000 or how much ever interest we are offering. This has a correlation in the schedule OS, wherein it specifically asks how much is your interest earned from savings bank account or post office or fixed deposit. Only if you fill there correctly, this particular deduction is eligible to be claimed. Again, if at all there is any loss in the other sources income, or if you have any loss under business income, which set off your income under the other sources. I repeat, you have business loss, which in the return automatically your other source loss has been set off. Then you cannot claim deduction under 80 TTA. Your income tax return form will not stop you to claim that deduction. It will allow the deduction to be claimed, but please remember, only and only if there is any income in the other sources. Finally, in the total income, if there is any income in the other source after set off of losses or anything, then only this deduction is eligible to be claimed. Then there is a non-reporting of any income, like if an individual is there, if he just gives us the form 16, we just rely on the form 16 without even asking for any other source of income, like without asking for the bank statement or without asking for any capital gain income during the year. So if any if he has received any consultancy income, all such thing we might not come to know based on just the form 16 alone. So it is important to understand from the client or get a email confirmation or declaration stating that there is no other income for the assessee. Because any given point of time, if at all anything happens, assessee might come back to us stating, this you never asked, hence I never gave. This is the simple shield which the assessee takes anytime when problem comes. So it is important that we, on our own, we be one step ahead and we get all the details what is required well ahead in time. Then there is exempt income. Yes, exempt income, there is specific schedule EI which needs to be reported. Any dividend income or any dividend from mutual funds, or if your capital gain less than 1 lakh rupees, or if there is any insurance policy maturity or any PPF interest, all such exempted incomes are also required to be disclosed. It is not that just because it is exempted and has no tax bearing effect, we cannot take a stand that it need not be disclosed. It definitely required to be disclosed. As a caution, we can also take the form 26 and ensure that proper cross verification with the 26 AS is done. 26 AS is one such form wherein even those not disclosed by the SSC or those not identified by us from the bank statement, easily those transactions can be picked up from the 26AS. 26AS form is now been much more updated, giving much more information than what was earlier available to us. So that particular form, we can definitely rely on it and get to understand, is there any other source of income for the SSC? That we can ensure that the TDS return and all has been properly, I mean, the TDS what is to be claimed has been properly claimed. Similarly, uh, the claim has to be recorded in the scheduled TDS. So sometimes it so happens that pre-fill is being done automatically, and sometimes it is not. So when you are doing it manually, it is important that the TAN number, the how much is the amount being claimed, under what head of income you are offering such income, uh, all those things are properly recorded in the income tax return form, because the TDS claim is dependent at the is dependent. I mean, the TDS what is going to be received is dependent on what we fill in the income tax return. Even if there is any small error in the TAN number, such claim will not be allowed, and again we will have to go in for the rectification, and it is an additional time and efforts required from our end. So in the Part A general sheet, there will be turnover of more than 1 crore. Audit is applicable, but still under the audit details, the details of the auditor are not filled in. Though the ITR will prompt you the error, I mean, it will not show it as a mandatory error, but still it will prompt you stating that your total turnover is exceeding 1 crore and please fill in the audit details. Still, if we ignore that and we go ahead and submit the IT return form, immediately on submission, there will be a defective return email being received stating that within 15 days, if you don't comply, if you don't correct it, your return will be invalid. And so again, you will have to go in and make the correction and resubmit the return, although the additional procedures and compliances will fall in place. Similarly, there is if you are if at all it is MAT, or if taxes are being paid as per MAT or AMT, then there is a form 29B or 29C as applicable, which is required to be filed mandatorily, and the filing detail has to be incorporated in the income tax return form in the Part A general sheet itself. So if at all it is not done, again defective return under section 139(1) email will be received. So to avoid all such things, it is important that all such forms or reports, wherever applicable, are disclosed of in the income tax return form. Please note, all these forms are to be filed first. Your tax audit report, your transfer pricing report, your 29B form, your 29C form, or if you are having any arrear of salary and you are claiming relief, or if you are claiming any foreign tax credit, then form 67. All these forms are to be filed first, and then only income tax return has to be filed. Even if it is done on the same day, it is mandatory that all these reports and forms are filed first, and then the income tax return is filed. So transfer pricing report I already mentioned. Then selection of the business code. So if at all partner in a partnership firm is there, initially when the new ITR forms were made applicable, that ITR 3 is mandatory for the a partner of a partnership firm, there was huge problems being faced by the SSC. Immediately 139(9) was issued stating that you have submitted the return. Because there is no business income, there is no requirement to fill in the balance sheet and P&L schedule. It is only the partnership remuneration or the interest on capital which the partner is going to receive, which specifically in the IF, Schedule IF, we can disclose it and income can be offered to tax. But if at all at that point of time, since the version of the utility was not supportive, hence 139.9 was issued. Later on, various submissions were made to the CBDT and correction was carried over, and now that issue has been resolved. So proper selection of the code is mandatory. Then comes the nexus between the tax audit report and the IT return forms. This has a relevance with 143.1A, which I talked earlier, and the Part AOI schedule. So basically, the tax audit report, what and all an auditor discloses in the tax audit report. Examples I could take is employee contribution, which has to be disallowed under section 36, subsection 1, subclause 5A. Employee contribution, if at all it is not paid within the due date of the EPF and ESI law, the provisions of Income Tax Act states that it has to be disallowed. Though there are various judgments, still presently 3615A states it has to be disallowed. So once you report stating that this is the due date and this is the actual date of filing, and correspondingly, if in the income tax return, if that amount has not been disallowed, I repeat, if that amount, wherever it has been paid after due date, if it has not been disallowed, then immediately 143.1A will be issued stating there is a variance between the income tax return filed and the tax audit report filed, and hence we propose to add back the expense as your income and taxes will be recalculated accordingly. Similar such examples would be disallowance under section 43B or personal expenditure like interest on TDS, interest on income tax, or personal expenditures being claimed, expenses under section 37, or the disclosure requirement under cash expense of more than 10,000 and cash. All those things has a relevance with the Part AOI, wherein what and all we disclose there, it has to be rightfully under the relevant section, it has to be disclosed in the Part AOI as well. Else 143.1A will be an additional compliance which we will have to deal with. One more issue was I came across that depreciation claim. Depreciation schedules like DPM, DOA are specifically given, wherein various rates of depreciation are specified, wherein your opening balance during the year, addition, deletion, entirely the format captures it. But in Schedule BP, there is one other line item, serial number 12, wherein you can directly mention the depreciation what is being claimed. This is applicable only if own computation is made and tax computation is not made as per the Income Tax Act. So generally this generally majority of the clients, Income Tax Act depreciation is only applicable, and hence we don't have to worry about it. Hence I suggest that depreciation schedules are to be mandatorily filled in, because if at all you directly fill in the Schedule BP, automatically at the time of processing of the return, such depreciation claim will not be allowed, and such depreciation will be added back to your income, and income will be recalculated accordingly, and taxes will be recalculated. Also, such depreciation correction can be made only via filing a revised return. Now, revised return has a time limit. Assuming your return filing due date is July, within the coming March, you will have to file the revised return. Assuming your return is getting processed in March, let's say March 25th, your return has been processed, 143.1A has been, or your return itself has been processed. You have come to know that this particular error has happened Actually, it will be received by email in the assessee's email. Assuming assessee forwards that email to us in the month of April, wherein revision of the return possibility time limit has been exceeded. Once we see it, we find that error is there. Next option, we'll have to file a revised return. Revision also, it is time barred because 31st March has already passed by. Next option, rectification. Rectification for this particular thing is not possible because for a rectification, or to file a rectification, error has to be apparent on the record. These type of error committed is not considered as a mistake apparent on the record, and hence there are high possibility that CPC might not allow the claim, and we might have to even the AO, the assessing officer might reject the claim. So it is very much important that it is filed correctly by filling up the schedules properly. Then once we get the capital gain reports of the clients, there are possibilities that the dividend or the mutual funds, the dividend income might be reinvested instead of receiving the income in the bank statement. There will be a dividend reinvestment concept wherein every dividend received is automatically getting reinvested into the capital, into the asset again. And there is a possibility of units of mutual fund. Assuming I have mutual fund, I switch over to another mutual fund. So capital gain arises on the date of conversion to another mutual fund. But in the bank statement, since there is no receipt, we might not come to know that there is a capital gain unless and until we go through the capital gain reports. Assessee may not be aware of it, but the person who is filling the form or the person who is verifying it has to be cautious here to take note of the fact that if at all any such transaction is there, such capital gain also has to be recorded and accordingly considered for the tax computation. Then comes the details of advance tax, TDS and self-assessment tax. Basically the challan details, all that thing have to be properly recorded in the income tax return, or else such claim will not be given. Then bank account, as I said, pre-filled bank accounts would be there. If at all any bank account has been closed or any new bank account has been opened during the year, we will have to get the bank account details from the assessee and update it here. Then failure to dispatch ITRV in time. Because of the time limits, because of the due dates, we might just file the IT return form. We might submit the income tax return form, and we might think that, okay, e-verification pending procedure is there. Let's do it. Since 120 days time limit is there, we will do it at later point of time. We might forget it. So it is important to have a note of it, which are the returns which have been submitted, which e-verification is pending, and such e-verification are to be completed, or such manual, if at all e-verification is not possible, such forms are to be manually signed by the assessee and sent to the CPC Bangalore. Then non-submission of ITRB. Again, if at all before completion of the processing of the return, we come to know that there is something error in the income tax return filed, we have the opportunity to file a revised return. Once we file the revised return, assuming original return, we have not e-verified it still. Original return not e-verified, revised return is filed subsequently, and revised return alone has been e-verified and ITRV acknowledgement has been generated. but we fail to e-verify the original return, then also the return will be treated invalid, because e-verification of original return is also mandatory, is also equally mandatory here. So it is important both the both the original return and the revised return are e-verified. So I think this is it, which I had to share with all of you. If at all any questions or any specific clarifications are required, I will be happy to take it up.
Yes, students can unmute yourself and ask the doubts for the sir. I think some are maybe inactive, sir, but that was a good, very good session. Thank you for the very good session. Actually, I think we'll wait for another 2 minutes for the students' doubts, or shall we continue? Hello.
Sir,
Hello.
Jainendra sir, if you have anything to say, you can continue the session, sir.
No, I am done with it, sir.
Okay, okay, sir. Okay.
Yes.
Yes, we'll wait for a minute or two for any queries or any doubts raised by the student participants.
Yes, sir. Sure.
Students, you can raise your queries by unmuting yourself and you can ask the speaker.
I think we can proceed, sir.
Yeah, okay. I request the secretary.
Everyone. Yeah.
I
Okay, sir.
request
Very
the
good.
secretary Sikasa Pawan to propose vote of thanks.
A very good evening to all. It gives me an immense pleasure to deliver the vote of thanks to the seminar to all the members and students assembled here. I would like to thank our branch chairman, CAG Bharati Devi Garu, and also the SICASA chairman, CAS Murli Krishna sir, and also our resource speaker, CA Jainendra sir, and all the students who attended the seminar today. Today, the seminar dealt in the subject in a detailed manner regarding the changes made in the recent fonts and all the updates in the key updates in the recent fonts in the for the assessment year 2020-21. Everything has been clearly explained by the resource person regarding all the sections in brief. So I hope students have been very much immensely benefited from the seminar, and the seminar will also be will be viewed in the YouTube also. So you could have again look over that. I'm running short of words to express the humble thanks for immediate acceptance of the seminar. Hope students got benefited through the seminar. SICASA committee is ready to organize more seminars in the upcoming days. The committee is also being with the students in any doubts regarding the advanced ITT and MCS batches. Committee is also answering in the best possible manner for the students. SICASA committee shall be with the students to solve all the academic issues. Students can address their issues to the sikasa@gmail.com and also through social groups. On behalf of the committee, I would like to thank you, sir, for the very wonderful session, and I would like to thank all the students for attending the seminar. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Jainendra sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for the opportunity. It was really wonderful getting in touch with such a wonderful branch. I really hope that I could come over there and
Please,
visit.
next time, once this COVID situation comes into normal, we expect you to physically come to Visakhapatnam branch and address the members as well as students also, depends on the topic. And we really enjoyed the session, and the participants have benefited really,
Sir?
and all the queries got cleared. So that is the reason why no queries raised, as you can say. Yeah, Pawan, anything to say?
Sir, many students are expressing their views. It was a very good session and very informative session.
Yeah.
And they're looking forward for further sessions even. So they are also thanking on behalf of us. Yeah.
Sir will be setting
Yes,
up a PPT so that we can distribute the PPT PowerPoint presentation to the students, Pawan.
Yeah, sir. Okay, sir. I'll collect it from him, sir.
So you are most welcome, sir. Next time we'll once
you,
this
sir.
things comes normal, we
Sure,
will
sir.
surely invite you. You please visit Visakhapatnam branch. You really will enjoy the city as well as the members' hospitality, sir. Please.
Definitely, sir.
Thank
Definitely.
you very much, sir. Thank you once
Thank you,
again.
sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.